Hello friends, I hope you are doing well. My name is Chintan, aka Froggy. For some of you, if you know me, you know the story behind Froggy. So today I'm going to talk about the practical hunting for the business logic vulnerabilities. Now this is very close to my heart because I've been doing pen testing from the last decade and through the consultancy and product-based companies, and there are various ways to find vulnerabilities and stuff. At the same time, if I look from the outside of company, then there is a bug bounty industry, which is very large crowdsourcing industry. And I have seen in the last 7 or 8 years, a lot of automations came into the process. A lot of veterans have been doing automation. A lot of tips and tricks and methodologies are there. At the same time, there is a darker side of bug bounty too. So I'm going to start with a darker side of bug bounty, and the reason to put out that information is to let you know what is happening in the market and what you need to do in order to find the business logic flow, and why this is the only chance that as a beginner, if you are starting, you will get more likely success compared to the veterans and people who have been doing bug bounties from decade and they have done all sort of automation. If the new target comes into the market, most of the stuff would be reported within the first 24 hours and so. Okay, so let's start slowly. This is going to be very long video, but trust me, I'm not going to only talk about this. I'm going to actually show you how I have been finding logic flows, what are my methodologies, and the steps are three, but the three steps are divided into two parts. So not two parts, but the two ways. So either you can follow the mind map way or you can follow the Excel way, depending on what you like. So let's slowly start. Okay, so Frog Behind the Lens. So basically all about me. I hardly put the introduction slide. But lately I've been getting a feedback that people might want to contact me, so that's why. So I'm not putting an introduction slide, but you can scan this QR code and that will lead you to my portfolio website where you can find all of my social media links and blogs and works, as well as all the checklists that I've been producing. So everything is there. So scan it, visit my profile and add me. Thank you. Okay, so let's slowly start with the darker side of bug bounty domain. Now, all of these darker side people are not talking about, and I don't know why. Um, some people who are into the content marketing, okay, they would only try to make a content which is something that they have been doing from the last 4 or 5 years. So if I have new methodologies and stuff, and I have been using some methodologies in the past which are 3 years old, okay, so that's not relevant to me personally, but that still works in the market. Okay, so I would only put out that 3-year-old methodology, right? And I'm not like that, so I do want to put the actual stuff which is most relevant, which is new. Okay, so kudos to those YouTube people and content creators, no hate to them, but there are a lot of darker side in the bug bounty, and I'm going to talk about every single darker side. So first is the market competition. So you know that market is very cluttered. So if you go to LinkedIn, if you go to Twitter, how many people are posting screenshots about what all vulnerabilities they have found, how many bug bounty they have got, how many Hall of Fames they have got. So market is very cluttered, and because the market is cluttered, you will find more duplicates. So imagine even in 24 hours, if you find things from nuclei, things from your own scanner, or you have your own checklist which can find low-hanging fruits easily and quickly, by the time you report it, it's all done. I'll also tell you the automation level has been done up to the level where a target comes into the market, automatically people would acquire the assets of those targets from the hacker one and from the hacker one and bug crowd, and automatically it will start sanitizing the asset and put them into the nuclei scanner. Not only into the nuclei scanner, but the results of the nuclei scanners will be taken, uh, kind of a AI will be implemented, or even if not AI, then people have already created a title, description, impact, reproducible steps, and recommendation, and that content will be generated either in the PDF or in a markdown format, and that report will be automatically submitted to the HackerOne bug bounty program for that target using the HackerOne API. Okay, so imagine in that cluttered market, if the new program comes in and then you try to find stuff, what are the chances? I mean, I'm talking about as a beginner, because the veterans or the experienced people would not go for nuclei or cross accepting and stuff, okay, until and unless they have a really good, automation tools. But this is the scenario currently in the market. There are elite closed circle groups where people talk about their real automation, and they do not share it with the world. Only limited access is there, and there is a lot of toxic competitiveness out there. If people post, I mean, have you also seen people posting like fake screenshots for the Hall of Fame and stuff, and just to get their marketing and done. Okay, so platform and financial dynamics. So inconsistent program triage scope, okay, because some companies would put something on the program, and probably they are not meeting the SLAs. Probably by the time they put out, they realize that we are getting a lot of vulnerabilities other than what they have expected number, and their internal team is very small, so they are not able to triage everything. So the program gets slow, their output gets slow, and there are power dynamics to the veterans. So the way HackerOne and Bugcrowd would work is there are two types of program. One is a VDP and one is a BGP. So vulnerability disclosure program, okay, and the bug bounty program. So for the bug bounty program where the money is involved, uh, first those program owners will work with the bug bounty platforms like HackerOne and Bugcrowd, and first they will try to roll out the limited, people. Those are the mostly veterans or people who have the good score on HackerOne and Bugcrowd. Okay, so they will try to find most of the stuff, they will fix it, and once they are under certain below, you know, uh, baseline of the number of vulnerabilities which are coming new on a weekly basis, then they would put that thing into the VDP, or they would, put that thing for open for all hackers and stuff. Okay, so there are power dynamics. So obviously, if you are starting now, I mean, I know that you have a potential. You can be a bug bounty expert, okay? But if you are starting now, you are still a beginner compared to those veterans who have been in the market from the last 10 years. So in that case, you are still, lagging behind, because it's not your fault, it's how the market works. Mental emotional load. So imagine you are trying, you are getting duplicate, you are hitting dead ends on recons, and there are no payouts because of the duplicate stuff. So your emotional state gets self-doubt. So you will try questioning yourself, and I have been getting a lot of questions that I don't know whether I'm going in the right direction. I don't know why I'm not able to find the bugs and stuff. So that psychological whiplash is definitely hitting you because of the inconsistent result, right? Now, obviously you have a potential. You learn the OAuth, you learn the burp suite and stuff. You have the potential. You pick a random website on the internet and try finding a bugs. I'm sure that you would be able to find it. I think where you are trying to find the bugs is the HackerOne and the Bugcrowd program, and lots of millions of hackers are already finding the bugs over there. So the chances to get something out of that is very minimal because of the cluttered market. So you will get a demotivation whether you are made for this industry or not, whether you have those skills or not. So don't get that, mental demotivation and emotional load. So the next one is the skill development risk. So some there are a lot of good YouTubers out there, and people idol worship copy pasting their technique. It may or may not work for the you, because those are the techniques they are showing you, the manual techniques. But if you're trying to copy paste the techniques, yes, the technique would work, but those techniques have been already automated by the veterans. Okay. And you try to copy paste the methodologies and the techniques and tools without understanding the fundamentals. You wouldn't know what are the program scope. You wouldn't know that out of XSS, let's say self XSS is not appreciated by the program owners, and then you try to find everything either through scanner or copy pasting the same exact methodology. It may or may not work because every application is different. Not everything, not a single methodology will work for every application, until and unless you're trying to find the OWASP top 10, because they are mostly related to the misconfiguration, low hanging fruit, injection and stuff. Now business logic is definitely different. Okay. And then you need to focus. Okay, you do bug bounty for building your skills. Pen testing is a very large domain in within the. So okay, so imagine this is the cyber security. Here is the offensive and defensive, most two parts. In defensive there would be SOC, VM, CTI, GRC and a lot of stuff. In offensive there would be a lot of pen test, red teaming, a little bit of purple teaming as well, but purple teaming, you know sits with the SOC mostly. Okay, so within the pen testing you still have a IoT pen testing, network, web application, API, thick client, thin client, smart car, or any sort of pen testing. So you do the pen testing to build your skills, not to, earn money through bug bounty. That will be your side hustle. Okay, so if you're only, copy pasting techniques and stuff, that you're not learning the basics, right? And there's a lot of hype on the social media lures, unrealistic expectations. Like there are a lot of course authors who would put a fake screenshot and stuff that, okay, if you enroll a course with us, you will, start earning, in 3 digits and 4 digits dollar through the bug bounties and stuff. At the same time, the individual bug bounty hunters are also putting out the screenshots on the, LinkedIn and Twitter. So I think you have to understand the dynamics of the, bug bounty, especially the darker side. And obviously there are good sides. Okay, so why I'm talking about the business logic flows? Because business logic flows will increase your chances for the successful hunt. And let me tell you why. The odds are increased because there's a unique advantage. So logic flows are like a bespoke. So for example, if you're talking about the product purchase, and let's say I'm able to purchase the product in, and let's say if I'm able to purchase the product in $5 instead of its original price, which is $50. Now, how on earth that can be automated through a script? Okay, probably you can still automate it if you want to, but for that application, for that particular feature, using those parameters and those requests only, but that will not work for any other, application. Okay, so every business logic flow depends on the business logic of the feature of the web application. And that is why there is a unique advantage. Why there is a unique advantage? Because you compete on your insight, not the tooling. You question yourself that how can I break this logic? Now, if you have more curiosity, if you can build more hypotheses. Now, what is hypothesis? So, hypothesis is something you are making an assumption or prediction that it, or a tangible, a decision that can it work, can it not work. So it's a like hypothetical scenario. Okay, so you are competing on your brain's capability, not the tooling. If there are tools, then yes, I mean, for example, automation, there are, I mean, we know that there are 32, 35 tools in automation, right from the, taking the asset, putting them into nuclei and map scanner, DRR, buster and everything. Okay, but put them aside. You are finding a business logic flow. No tools will be helpful. Okay, so now you are competing your brain with someone else's brain. Okay, if you look at one feature, for example, password reset, you can think of 5 test cases based on your creativity. Okay, some people can think like 7 test cases based on their creativity. Okay, so now you are competing on the real hypothesis by, not tolling but by your brain. Okay, so longer finder window. So basically business logic flows will take a little time for you to discover, but because of the unique angle, uh, you will get a more success. Okay, the same reason which I mentioned earlier. Okay, then defensible is, so your mental model questioning styles aren't copy pastable. Okay, so imagine I told you that I look at the business logic flow, password reset, for example, I can think of 5 test cases. Okay, doesn't matter how much experience I am. Okay, but if you have more curiosity, you can ask more questions to yourself and you can create more hypotheses. Hypotheses are nothing but the misuse test cases. Okay, so for example, how can I break this feature in 5 different ways? So those 5 different ways becomes your test cases. Okay, so that's why you get an advantage compared to even, veterans who are in this market. Obviously they would have slight advantage, but still, I mean, you are able to compete them. Now you are in the same league. So portable mindset. So if I look at the password reset feature, and I can think of a 6 test cases for that particular application, now that will work or may not work for the different application, even if they have the password reset feature. Okay, because every application stacks are different, their methodologies are different, their parameters, their requests and responses are different. The way server assume the way server assumes that how an input will be coming to them is different. Okay, compounding learning. So each map workflow, and what is a workflow, how to create a workflow, how to use the mind map is something that I'm going to share in the later part. So each map workflow pattern sharpens your future recognition. So basically you test 3 applications for the password reset flows. Okay, and then you total generated 18 test cases. There are next and let's say there is a fourth application that you're going to test. So probably most of those 18 test cases would be applicable, some wouldn't be, right? But in the fourth one, then you will generate a 5 new test cases which were not there in the first 18. Okay, so now you have 23 total test cases for the fifth application if it comes across you. So it's a compound interest. So less noise in triage because, for example, if you look at the automation tools like Nuclei and other stuff, and if they're able to find, CV because it's a grab and match or XSS and stuff, and let's say XSS for example. So how many programs are receiving XSS vulnerabilities on a very daily basis? Okay, so, and there are still three parts, and self-XSS is still, accepted in some program, not some program and all. Now, business logic flows are very easy to determine because you cannot doubt yourself that you found a vulnerability whether it's a valid or not because you knew the business feature, in how certain way it has to be, executed as a normal user. Okay, and then you reverse that logic, so definitely you broke something, so there are high chances that it's a clear violation. So it's easy to validate for the companies as well. And because it's a business logic flow, you're breaking that logic, mostly they would be around, high to critical severity. So these are the odds that will increase your, chances and your probability of finding business logic flaws, even if you start today, because it all depends on your uniqueness and creativity. And nowadays, your creativity is like 50% your creativity, 50% AI's creativity, and then you combine both of them. Resilience to the market later. So when common vulnerabilities hunting saturates, for example, nuclei, I mean, when it came, a lot of people found a lot of stuff, but now it's all been automated. So hardly you will run a nuclei and you will find a unique, vulnerability which will be accepted by the program and it's not been submitted by anyone else. Okay, but the business logic flow hunting keeps producing a unique and high impact results because every application is different, every request is different, your creativity is different, your hypotheses are different, your method is different compared to other people. So that's why if you are starting bug bounty, I would suggest learn the basics about the web application, how it works, how to look at the feature, how to understand what would be happening in the background, and then how to test it using the business logic flows. Okay, and the methodology is something that I'm going to share here. Okay, so there are three steps methodology. I call it a Fieldcraft. So basically, it's a playground where we are going to play within the three steps. Okay, now there are three steps and two ways. Okay, so total three steps. Now you can execute these three steps either using the mind map methodology, which I'm going to show, or you can do the same thing using the Excel methodology, which I'm also going to show. Okay, so the first step is understand the workflow. Define the normal sequence of every deviation becomes a test case. Okay, so basically I have quoted the normal, which means if I'm testing the password reset flaw, I do not need to turn on my burp suite, I do not need to capture my request, I just need to use that feature as a normal user. Okay, and then try to understand the steps. Okay, how did I come to the password reset page, or what is the input they're taking from me? How does the request goes to the server? Okay, if it goes to the server, what I'm getting next? Am I still being on the same page or am I getting an email? If I'm getting an email, then okay, if I click, what are the email contents? How the URL is crafted? Okay, if I click on the email, do I still, navigate and redirect to the same page I was in the browser, or it creates a new tab? Okay, when I input the new password and the confirm password, okay, does it stay on the same page or it goes to the new tab? And when I input a new password and old password, it does it keep me on the same page within the logged in session, or it just logs out automatically? If it logs out automatically, does it log out like from the all the devices or just one device? Okay, so you are just using a feature as a normal user and trying to create a hypothesis in your mind. So whatever is a normal sequence, and if you find the deviation, that becomes your business logic flaw. Okay, and that deviation is something which we call a misuse. Okay, I'm going to talk about that a little bit of detail in the next slide. Okay, so build misuse hypothesis. Okay, so you found the normal, what is a normal? Okay, and then try to ask these questions to yourself. Okay, what happens instead of email if I give a phone number? What happens if I give two requests but I use the first link? Okay, so you now, because you have the normal workflow in a detailed manner, you can try questioning each step of your workflow in from the first output. So basically here you are defining all the normal sequence. So let's say for the password reset flow there are like 6 or 7 steps from GUI. Okay, now for each 6 and 7 step you are trying to find a misuse hypothesis. The first step was you have to give an email ID. Okay, in that password is it. Okay, so here your hypothesis becomes, okay, what if I give something else? What if I don't give anything and submit blah blah blah? Okay, now let's say fourth or fifth step is to click on the link. okay, which goes to the browser. Okay, what if I forward this link to someone else? Does the link, associated with the email ID and stuff or something? Okay, so these are the different misuse hypotheses. You will do that. Now, in the third step, you will repeat the same process, but now you have mapped the GUI to the HTTP. So imagine password reset flow, and then you found, let's say, 15 misuse hypotheses just by looking at the GUI. Okay, but once you look at the GUI and the HTTP request, and HTTP request might have some hidden parameters, might have some hidden cookies. Okay, it might have some get parameters, it might have some server headers. So by looking at those parameters and values in the HTTP, now you can define additional test cases, or you can say misuse hypothesis, which you can add up to your output of the second step. So imagine here, password reset flow, there are 6 or 7 steps which generated 10 different misuse hypotheses. Now you're looking at the HTTP request and repeating the normal workflow without starting to test. And now after looking at the HTTP request, you can generate 5 more test cases. So total your 15 misuse hypotheses, which means total you are having a 15 test cases just for one feature, which you are now testing that into the detail. Okay. So I hope that makes sense up to here. So that is the flow that we are going to follow. Okay, so let's start with the step one, understand the normal workflow. Okay. Okay, so what is the objective? So establish the application baseline normal. So every deviation we can test. So I mentioned about the password reset. Let's say we are in the bank website and then I'm transferring one from one account to another account. Okay, so what is the normal workflow? So I went to my account, I selected the account that I want to transfer money, I put the money and then I'm transferring. Okay, so that's a normal workflow. So this is the objective, to find a normal workflow. How does the application feature work successfully? That is a normal. Okay, so scope. So we'll cover all feature end-to-end flows outside and inside authentication. So basically, now I'm talking about the larger pen test. So if you are having a pen test or let's say bug bounty, okay, then you have to map every single workflow for every application. Search bar, registration, contact us, login, my profile, comment section, product purchase or flight ticket booking, or let's say bank transfer, or depending on the web application feature. Include user administrative journeys where applicable. So if you have two users, okay, so what is a normal workflow for one user? What is a normal workflow for the high privilege user, which could be admin? Okay, now how does it work? So use like a real user, navigate as intended, no shortcut on the first pass. Okay, when I say no shortcuts on the first pass means use like a normal user. Do not try to capture request, do not try to see the request, do not open the web developer, just know what it does. That's it. Record every transition, screen action, next step section, note prerequisite and decision points. Okay, so let's say password reset flow. So record every transition. I am on the password reset flow. Okay, now what I have to do? I have to give email ID. So that becomes my prerequisite. Okay, okay. If I give a Okay, if I give the email ID, then I'm clicking on the submit button. Okay, so what happens? Does it ask me something else where the next screen goes, or it just gives me a message? So what are the decision point? What is happening next? So try to record each and every sequence. Okay, so that is your normal one. So this is how you should work. So what to capture? So what input is taken? How does it process on the server, or what server would be assuming or expecting from the user? What output is retrieved? Whether I get the output on the normal screen, whether I get the output on the email directly, or whether I don't get any output, it's just processes on the server, or it doesn't process. I don't know. I don't get any messages. So now you are working with the D1. D1 is a deliverable one. So step one has a deliverable one, which is understanding the business workflow and identifying the normal process. Okay, so that is something that we'll create. So I'll give you an example too. Definition of done. You Once you get a website, first from the GUI you will identify every single feature. You will name it down, and then you'll start using those feature one by one, and then you'll start creating a D1 workflow for each feature. Okay, one feature might have two steps. Let's say search bar. You found the search bar, you input, you hit enter, and then you got something. Okay, some could be a complex feature. So let's say you want to change your profile picture. So you have to log in, go to your my profile, upload a page, click on submit, and let it process, and then you are able to see. So some might have six steps, some might have two steps, three steps. So you have to record all the steps. Okay, so if you complete that for entire application, that is the definition of done in step one. Okay, so we'll take an example of password reset flow. Again, first of all, I'm still going through the theory. Once I complete the password reset flow for first three steps, okay, then I will use Altoro Mutual's bank, vulnerable bank, and I'm going to repeat the same process but for another feature. So now you will have example of two features. One is the password reset flow, which I'm explaining here through theoretical methodology, and I will do the practical on the another feature, which is transferring from one account to another account. So now you will get two examples. Okay, so my deliverable one becomes a reproducible flow map. Okay, which is what is the workflow? Password reset via email link. Okay, steps. So start, go to forgot password page. You can submit the email submitted, reset link sent, email out of bound. Email out of bound means now you are not on the same website. You have to go out of band from that page to go to your email and find the link. User opens the reset link, reset from the token, submit the new password is updated, success page, and optional login. Okay, so for example, one password is upload. These are the basic six steps. Okay, I'm not logging six steps out of my brain that what are the ideal password reservoir. I'm logging it as if I'm looking at some website and then producing these steps. Okay, so now let's go to the step two, build the hypothesis. Misuse hypothesis. So misuse hypothesis are nothing but the test cases. Okay, how would you try to reverse the logic or break the logic of a normal? But this one which we are doing, and the step three is the same thing, but in the step two we are doing it without looking at the HTTP request and response. Okay, so build the misuse hypothesis part one. So objective is to turn the baseline flow into the rule book into the misuse hypothesis by challenging what the server assumes at each steps. Now that step either it's on the UI or on the backend feature. Okay, probably it might look a bit of a difficult, but once I explain how to do it, you will understand. Okay, so what it tells you is that you have each and every step here. Now you start building the misuse hypothesis. Okay, now how to do that? You have to do that for all the six or seven steps that you are seeing. So you have to take the D1 deliverable one output into the step two. Okay, and you will also take the deliverable two output into the step three. Okay, so it's a compound. Okay, so how to do that? Look and understand how GUI works, which we have done that in the step one. Okay, think of ways to break it. Now, because business logic flows are unique, there are no single methodology or single database of test cases which you can apply everywhere. And it was very hard for me to explain through this slide that how can I try to still make it a generalized methodology or the approach which you can use, and then you can still do the business logic flow uniquely. So these are my ways I'm thinking, which I have been doing, and this is something that I want to let it out from my end so that you can think of in the same approach. Okay, so how would you try to break the normal of any application? So first thing is to repeat the process. Okay, so you repeat it one time, two time, three time, which server might not be expecting. Okay, you repeat the entire feature like one or two time, or you repeat the one or two steps within the entire feature before it goes to the third step. Okay, so the second one is break. So break the sequence of step one by skipping the method or process. For example, password reset flow. So now we have to, let's say, come here and look at the start and forget password page, submit email. Okay, email is submitted, reset link. Okay, so for example, is it possible for me to directly, give a new password and password update it without opening a link here? Can I skip this step or not? Okay, so this is how you have to build your hypothesis. So you repeat the part of the process or the entire process one or two times and see what happens. You break the sequence of one step or multiple steps to go to the next steps. Third one is a join. So let's say there are two distinct processes. What if you try to combine two processes into one? What if you try to use the same methodology or same parameters or same inputs to one methodology? So let's say you have the reset link 1 and reset link 2, and both the links have three different parameters. Okay, so one parameter is email ID and the other two parameters are token. So what if I can use the token 1 of the first link into the token 2 of the second link? Okay, so can it be possible or not? Okay, so the fourth one is the tone and garbage. Try to give a garbage by assuming server will misunderstood. So let's say if I look at the flow here. Okay, so where is the input taken? Okay, so input is taken, submit email. Input is taken, new password. Okay, what if I give a garbage value here? Any text or which is not even in the form of integer or character, or it's just a garbage text. Okay, So how can I do that? Okay, can I do that or not? Can I do that on here, new password and all? Even if the new password and password updated, even if the new password and the confirm password fields are accepting the special character, but what if I don't give any characters which are part of my keyboard? Okay, and then yes, you can do that. For example, if you open any GPG file into the text and then you copy the garbage and try to give that garbage, I don't know how server will assume. I don't know how server will accept that or not. Okay, so that is the fourth step, which is repeat, break the sequence, join multiple process into one, multiple parameters into one and stuff. And obviously you wouldn't know until you come to this. The fourth one is the tone and garbage. Try to give the garbage value and let's see how the server, misunderstands everything. Reverse. You are following one pattern from the left to right. Can you do any part of the process or the entire process from right to left? Or if you are following from the top to bottom, can you do bottom from top for the entire feature or one or multiple step within the entire steps scenario? Okay, so for example, bank transfer, you can only transfer from a check account to the saving account. Can you do the reverse stuff? Okay, you are only transferring, 124 or $125, okay, from one account to another account. Can you transfer the minus one? How would you try to think that I want to reverse the logic? So, for example, this feature is made for one particular intent. How can I try challenging the intent that I'm not going to work like that? Okay, I'm going to work like that. So become, I would say, be like a spoiled kid. Like, for example, we all were in our schooling, and whatever teacher tells, we always do the opposite. Okay, so this is the way you would try to think and build your hypothesis to do the reverse testing. Okay, so these are the steps. Keep in mind: repeat, break, join, turn, garbage, or reverse. Okay, now when you do that, what is your output? So you had the steps in the D1. Okay, now based on the steps you created misuse hypothesis. So now we have a kind of a table. So I'm only showing the table methodology through the theoretical method, but when I do the practical, I'll show you the both. How does the table look like? How does the mind map look like? Okay, so D2 is your hypothesis matrix, which is coming from the assumption. Okay, so it will look something like this. So let's say server assumes that the response text does not reveal the account existence. Okay, because you created all these assumptions, or these are the new normal. So requests are rate limited because yes, you have looked at the requests and you feel that they are rate limited. So first look at only the column one. Do not even look at any other column. Okay. Token is single time use. Why? Because you clicked on the token, you updated the password, you clicked on the token, it didn't work for you. Okay. So these are the normals that you have derived from all the steps. Now for each and every normal, what are the misuse hypotheses? So misuse hypotheses are either repeating the steps, breaking the sequence, reversing the stuff, giving a tone or garbage. Okay, so think from that point of view. Okay, so for example, tokens are single use only. So what if I reuse the token? So that is your reverse logic. Okay, password policy enforced on the server side. Okay, what if client only enforcement is there? Okay, now this is your hypothesis. You haven't tested it. Okay, if you test it, then only you would know. Okay, so these are your hypotheses based on the steps. So these are the assumptions from the steps. So when I say password policy enforced on the server side, okay, this is your assumption. Okay, but in order to test whether it's true or not, then you need to create a misuse hypothesis. So misuse hypothesis again would be from those five steps: repeat, tone, garbage, break sequence, and uh, reverse the logic. Okay, let's say uh, requests are rate limited per account IP. Okay, throttling, absence week. So let's say requests are limited for the so let's say requests are rate limited per account or IP. Why? Because you tested it from UI without even looking at HTTP requests. Okay, and then you came to know that I think these are something that server might be doing. Okay, now this is your assumption. So what is your hypothesis? So can you do the throttling? If throttling is there or not? Okay, can you do the bulk request and still use the oldest one and all? Okay, so this is how you would create a second column, which is misuse hypothesis. Try to challenge the assumption of how server or feature or step of each and every app is using, and then try to create a misuse hypothesis, which becomes your test cases. Okay, from here onwards everything is very easy. Okay, so for example, let's say response text does not reveal the account existence. So the misuse hypothesis would be enumeration leaks via content or timing. Okay, so that means that if you give an email ID and you click on the submit button and it tells you that we have sent the password reset link on XYZ email ID, or it tells you that we cannot send the link on this email ID because the account does not exist with us. Okay, so that would be a link. Okay, so once you create the misuse hypothesis, and now you have to start testing it. And testing is very easy because you all know burp, you all know what you are trying to do. You just didn't know what are the misuse hypotheses. Now you know it, so you can test it. And then whatever is true positive or false positive. Okay. So true positive if a different body status latency patterns, or if you're getting a different content, different message, okay, then it's definitely this one as this assumption has been false, because your hypothesis definitely worked and then you found a vulnerability because it's a true positive. Okay, if it's false positive, which means you are only guessing the same message every time. Okay, so again, let me go back to step one. So step one will create the new normal. Okay, so password reset flow. So these are all the steps. You'll just note it down in the Excel file. Now, based on each and every step, without looking at HTTP request, you will repeat the step two. Step two is repeat, break, join, tone, garbage, reverse. Okay, so try to think like a bad school student who is opposing everything what your teacher or professor says. Okay, and those opposite things are nothing but the misuse hypothesis. Okay, so you derive the server assumption from the steps that this might be happening on a normal one, and then you try to define the misuse hypothesis, and then you know how to write this. But now whether you write this or not is up to you, but at least up to here you definitely got the misuse hypothesis. Okay, okay, so now we're gonna repeat the step two into the step three, but this time we are mapping the GUI to the HTTP so that we can look into the request part now. Okay, so step three is objective is to create a complete repayable map that links every UI action into the HTTP request and response. Okay, and then you can start indexing it for the later mutation. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say here is you knew the feature from UI, you created some of your assumptions that servers are making these sort of assumptions as a normal request and response. Okay, you created a hypothesis by using that break, join, tone, garbage, repeat, and reverse. Okay, and then now you did all the activity without looking at the HTTP request. Now, why step three is important? Now, if you look at the normal HTTP request for the normal workflow, who knows there are more hidden parameters which are not presented in the GUI. So once you know the hidden parameters, you can define more test cases or more hypotheses. Okay. So how it's going to work? So turn on the proxy, act capture for each and every visible action, whether you click submit navigation, input text, or drop down selection, or drag and drop, file upload, anything. Capture everything into the Bob suite. Extract the record, method, path, query, body, headers, cookie, state, timing, and everything. Okay. Basically, I'm trying to let you know that basically I'm trying to tell you that inspect the every element of the HTTP request. Basically, a request a lot. Yes, in some cases a response as well, but mostly a request part. Normalize and tag. So when I say tag, which means try to tag that in your mind that okay, I'm looking at three different parameters. So what are these three different parameters? What could be its use? Okay, can you identify the meaning of these parameters by looking at the name of the parameter? If I look at the new password and the confirm password, I know what they are doing. Okay, if I look at the random text like xyz is equal to 123email.com, then I don't know what that xyz means. Does it mean it's a sanitized name of the email in the server, or I don't know what that parameter does. Okay, so you try to give the field names in your mind that what are the identifiers, what are the actual parameters. Whatever I have mentioned here, identifier, amount, state, role, token, which means you look at the request, you identify a majority of this, and you give your brain a thought that okay, these parameters are there for XYZ certain reason. And once you know that, you can build more hypotheses on that. Step 5 is link order. So link each UI action to the request and build step-by-step timeline. So you are doing the same first four thing, but the step 5 is more about the completing the workflow for the entire application. If one feature has six different requests, then you would have to log six different requests and then try to build your hypothesis. Okay, flag the importance. Mark important parameters, header, cookies likely to influence the logic of the entire feature. Okay, so again, I told you that okay, you have to identify those parameters which are either state identifier. Let's say some parameters are dependent because without that this action cannot be performed. Some identifiers are some parameters are there for the role, right? Because that tells you that this is the user role and that allows the user to do the certain action. Okay, so you do that activity on the fourth. In the sixth ones, once you look at the complete HTTP request, okay, you identify the marked important parameters versus non-important. Okay, so let's say sometimes there are tracking cookies or Google cookies for the tracking and ads and stuff, so you ignore them. But let's say you are finding a new password, a confirm password, but at the same time you are finding user ID is equal to something, then those are your important part of the headers cookie. So you try to mark them down, okay, and update the hypothesis matrix based on the misuse case, because once you know what the parameter does by looking at the name and the value, then you can try building more misuse hypothesis by repeating the step two, which is repeat break sequence, tone, garbage, and reverse. Okay, so what is the output? So output is the same as D2, which is assumption hypothesis matrix, but this time is an updated one. So for example, in D2, without looking at the HTTP request, we could still made a lot of assumptions, and then we created a misuse hypothesis, which is test cases. Okay, but now we are looking at the HTTP request, we found more parameters. Okay, so now because we are looking at the HTTP request, we know there are certain more elements to the entire workflow which are not visible on the UI. For example, CSRF token is something which we found. We found there is a new password and confirm password. Parameters are there. Yes, these are also visible on the UI part. And the reset workflows has client session and all, which we couldn't identify through the GUI. So because you identified these things from the because you have identified these things from the HTTP request, now you will create a misuse hypothesis. If the token is there, what can I do with the token? Repeat break, tone apart, reverse, break sequence, and all. Okay, so if I see the confirm password and new password is there, what can I do? Okay, so what if the server ignores the mismatch and still accept the change? Okay, let's say from UI, it accepts the same password on the both field. So it does not allow you to click on the submit button, but you can give the same password, but then you come to the proxy and then you change the different password. And what if the server still accepts? Because let's say the primary key was the new password, not the confirm password. Okay, so this is the process that we are going to follow. So without further delay, let's start the practical. I'm not going to follow the password reset because now you know what all can be done with the password request, and these are only couple of test cases. Okay, because this is just something that I wanted to let you know the methodology. Okay, I'm going to do that, and there are two different ways. Okay, first is the mind map way, another is the Excel way. Okay, so first let me tell you the Excel way. Okay, so let's jump right into that. Okay, so what I have done, I have the Bob suite here. I'll open. I hope the spelling is correct. Yeah, the spelling is correct. Okay, so this is the website which I'm going to test, and let me put that into the scope part. And I'm only looking at the scope. Proxy, same, let's say history. I don't want CSS and other text. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the presentation. Okay, I'm going to repeat all the steps with you. You can also start practicing with me. Probably you can take another feature on the same website and let's do it together. Okay, so step one, understand the normal workflow. Okay, so I'm going to here. Okay, let's see. I'm going to log in into the account and I know the password and admin. Okay, I want to utilize the transfer fund functionality. Okay, so transfer fund. So let's say I'm opening the Excel file. Now, what does the presentation says? Okay, what you need to do, you need to use the feature as a normal stuff. and then you will need to create the D1 output. Okay, what is the normal stuff? So this is the format that we are going to follow. Okay, so let's say we are giving a workflow and we are giving a name transfer fund. Okay, now within the transfer fund steps. Okay, now we are going to derive the steps like this. So in order to come to the transfer fund, we still had to log in, right? So we will say login into account. I'll zoom it for you. Login into the account, click on transfer fund. Okay, now you see a from account and to account and amount to transfer. Okay, so let's say you pick three, observe below. Step 4, select account to transfer. So what is the fourth step? This is the to account. I cannot send from my own corporate account to my corporate account. Probably I could, but this is the hypothesis that I'm creating. Okay, so I'm using a feature as a normal functionality. So let's say I need to select another account, which is this one. Okay, and then I need to give a money. Let's say 132. Okay, and then I need to click transfer. So basically, give input here, select amount to transfer, which is give input there, and transfer funds, which is the button. So transfer fund, click the button. Okay, now one thing that I want to let you know that you may feel that this is very basic stuff. Why am I explaining this? Okay, business logic flow or anything in the pen testing and red teaming or anything, it's all about the documentation. I know that you know how to test stuff directly within the HTTP request. Okay, but why we still need to follow the process is because that you do not miss out any important stuff. Okay, imagine you know how to test one feature with six different test cases, but what if you miss one which you couldn't think of out of your brain without looking at the stuffs in detail? That is why the documentation is very important, and when once you create this sort of documentation, that will help your manager to review or someone else to review that yes, you have done everything from the completeness point of view. Okay, so you click on the transfer for button and it says you get this message. Okay, so you got the successful message. So I believe this is it. This is something which we have done. Um, so our step one is completed. So we created a reproducible flow map. Okay, now let's go to the D2. So D2 was you for each and every step you try to repeat, break, join, on garbage, reverse, and then try to create a hypothesis. Okay, so I'm going to let's say I'm going to take these titles and first put them here. Okay, I hope you can still read it. Let me go back to presentation. Sorry, I have three different. Sorry, I have three different screens, so I might be looking here and there. Please bear with me. Okay, so I have copy pasted the title here. Okay, so I have copy pasted all the titles here. Um, this is coming from the D2. Okay, so our D2 for the password reset flow says that you need to create a assumptions based on the steps. Okay, so let's just focus on the server assumptions. Okay, so if I go here, my first assumption by looking at the different steps, and again I'm telling you that you need to create a server assumptions not by looking at only one of these but everything. And let's say if you want to always keep it on top of your head, you can always copy this, go to your Excel, and let's say probably give it here. So every time when you look at it, you can think of ways. Okay, so now, okay, so first thing, the login into the account. Okay, so now first you need to create the server assumptions. So server assumptions are that which are the normal things which are happening. Okay, and then you will create a misuse hypothesis. Okay, so I'm assuming that um, login is required to transfer fund. Okay, so that is my assumption. Okay, what could be the misuse hypothesis? So it's something opposite to that. Either you break it, repeat it, join it, tone garbage, or something. So now my first misuse hypothesis for this server assumption is um, transfer funds without logging into account. Okay, I will fill these part later on, but first I'm only focusing on the assumptions. Okay, login into the account. Can I do any sort of assumptions? I do not think so because I think this is the only one. Click on the transfer fund. Okay, so you click on the transfer fund and then you land there. Okay, so probably server assumption is that link must be exist in order for user to be used. Okay, now this looks like a very lame server assumption, but sometimes let's say you are testing this application on the 2025. Okay, after 6 years you are again testing this application. Okay, and let's say you are opening your work paper. I call this a work paper. Okay, now you already had a server assumption and which was a false positive because yes, there was a link. Okay, because the hypothesis I would create is use this functionality without going to the GUI link. Okay, so let's say you capture the link and you paste it here. Okay, in future after 5 6 years, let's say this feature is completely gone from GUI, can you still use the work paper, copy paste the link into the browser and the functionality still exists? So every test case or every hypothesis can be a lame, but that depends on your creativity. Okay, so click on the transfer fund. So link must be exist because that is my assumption, otherwise you can't use that. Okay, but if they remove the link in future and I can still use that, that becomes my true positive hypothesis. Okay, so observe the account, from account to account and all. Okay, so one of my assumption is from, and so now the third one is the observe the below. So from account to account and amount to transfer and all. So now I'm talking about my one user. Okay, so my one of my assumption is, because if you look at uh, because if you look at the from account into account, now again I'm logged in as an admin, so these are my two accounts, corporate and checking. Okay, so for example, one of my assumption would be uh, corporate and checking. What was it? Checking. Yeah, so one is a corporate, another one is checking, so I need to copy paste these info over here. Okay, so corporate and checking account numbers must be different. Why? Because I can see that they are different. Okay, so what would be my hypothesis? Can checking and corporate account number be same, or can I use them as same by transferring from corporate to corporate or checking to checking? Okay, what if I can transfer from corporate to corporate or checking to checking, but not the vice versa? Okay, so that would be my hypothesis. Okay, now you look at the GUI feature, it says amount to transfer. Okay, so amount to transfer is let's say 125. Now you again try to repeat this. So what would be my assumption is, if you look at the, okay, before coming to this feature, you would obviously test the other features, and that's where you would come to know that there is an account summary. So account summary, if you go to the corporate, that will tell you how much balance you have, and then obviously you would come to these features. So one of my assumption would be you can only transfer amount that are in your account. Okay, so let me freeze the first pen. Okay, so what would be my hypothesis here? Transfer more funds than in your account. Okay, so that would be the important part. I can transfer more stuff. Okay, now if you imagine, if I give 132 and I click on the transfer, let's say, okay, so now it gives me an error, so that will become my false positive. But let's say if checking to this one and I click on transfer, okay, so I get this message. So I get this message, okay, and I'm just transferring 132, but it just adds a 0.0 at the end. Okay, so first of all, I'm assuming that only integer or float positive values are accepted to transfer fund. Okay, so what would be my hypothesis? Can I transfer negative amount to from my one to another account? So that would be my hypothesis. Why? Because I can only give 132, 140. But what if I give minus 142? What happens? What does the server does? We don't want to test it. We are just building the hypothesis. Okay, we look at the flow. So checking corporate is done, amount of transfer is done, transfer funds, and then click on the submit button. Okay, so submit button is already there. So I'm assuming that without submit button, you cannot initiate the request. Okay, so my hypothesis would be, what if I can initiate transfer without clicking on submit button? Okay, so now this looks again a very lame test case or hypothesis, but imagine tomorrow you don't have this feature at all, okay, but you had the complete request. Okay, so now in GUI you don't have that request. So now in GUI you don't have that feature, but because you had the complete pass request, you can repeat that process again. By looking at this one, you can repeat that process and then you can still do that. Okay, so let me format it a little bit. Okay, so we got, let's say, 6 test cases just for this feature as of now without looking at the HTTP request. Um, and then one of the other assumption is 132.0 was successfully transferred from the account this to this at this time. Okay. Now, my assumption is that if I give, okay, so my assumption is uh, point 0 or something is added if integer value is presented. Okay. So what would be my hypothesis? So let's say if I'm giving 132, it gives me the response of 132.0. What if I give a float value as 132.32? Does server return back as 132.32.0, or it only returns 132.32? Okay. Now again, this looks like a lame test case, but it's still a test case. Why? If you add only integer, okay, it just adds a point 0 at the end. But what if if you give a float? If you give 132.32 and if it returns 132.32, it's fine. But if it returns 132.32.0, which means the process might have done successfully, but I'm not sure how much would be actually added to my account because the message looks completely different. So from a user experience point of view or from the logical point of view, it seems very odd. So that is how I would try to break it. Okay. Now again, you try to look at this. So repeat, break, join. Okay. So I'm assuming that once you okay, so look at the repeat part. Okay, so submit button can be used one time only per request. Okay, so what if I can repeat entire transaction without manually clicking submit button multiple times? Okay, now another, can I do anything else? Break, joint on tone and garbage is that. So uh, number values are only presented. So number values are only used to transfer funds. What if I can give a character or any other garbage value? Okay, can it be possible? Okay, so again, these are all my hypotheses. Okay, so I think these are enough for the practical. I'll go back to the presentation, which is here. So you have created D2, which is this one. Great. Now you map the GUI to the HTTP. Okay, so I would also request you to log the GUI. Now I mentioned about the two methods. So first method is the Excel file, and it's very hard to use Excel. But if you use the mapping method, then you can log the GUI request. So I think one of the column which I would add here is HTTP request. Okay, so for each and every step, we would log an HTTP request. Okay, again, this would be a common through across all. Okay, and then again this one I'll let you know. So now I'm going here. Let's say I'm going to Bob Suite. I'm clearing all the history for now. Okay. Now let's say I click on the transfer fund because I need to go there. So I look at the request. Uh, I don't see anything else here because there are no parameters and stuff. But still, I would copy paste this. Why? Because that's necessary. So here, go to transfer funds, and then I would copy paste this. Okay, now this one I will slightly reduce the fonts. Okay, so you can imagine this is a request. So what can you check from this request? Okay, so looking at the request, I see most of the static stuff. I see some of the headers here. I can see the parameters here. Okay, so I can see some cookies. Okay, so I'm assuming that J session ID cookie is used for the session IDs. Okay, so what I'm going to do is write one more. Now, without looking at the HTTP request, still I managed to secure the nine server assumption and nine hypotheses. Okay. Now, after looking at the HTTP request, I'm going to generate more use cases. So, for example, let's say my assumption is this session ID is used to maintain the session of the active user, which could be admin. Okay. What if I remove session ID and still repeat the request? Okay, because again you would come here and check what can you do, repeat, break, join, tone, reverse. Okay, so this is your assumption that this is used for to maintain the session ID. So what is something that we are using from here, which is reverse. Okay, so if J session ID is used to maintain the session, which is a normal, the reverse of that would be not using the J session ID and still repeat the request. Okay, so we are using reverse and still repeat. Okay, now you look at the other cookie. Okay, okay, so if J session ID is used to maintain the active user session, then what is this cookie? I'm not sure. Okay, so we're gonna take it Altoro accounts. Now, but just by looking at the name, I'm guessing that this cookie is used to maintain the account names of the user. I'm not sure, I'm just guessing, I'm having a assumption, okay, because I'm just guessing it by the name. I told you that you have to look at the parameter and its value. So parameter name, when I look at it, I'm just assuming that alternate name is, used to maintain the account names, okay. uh, and let's say, and it is encoded, because that is something you can easily see, okay. What if I decode the value and I can try changing it? Okay, so I think the transfer fund is done. Now we'll again go to the corporate to checking, and let's say if we change something here, does it generate a new request? No, it does not. And then I'll give 145. It generates a new request, nothing. And if I click on transfer, and then I get a new request. So this is the new post request. Okay. So again, I'll go here. This was the first one. Then I'll just mark it as bold. The second one would be transfer funds, and I'll paste the request here. Okay, now more server assumptions, more hypotheses again. So I'll try to first look at the request. So okay, let me go back here. Okay. Okay, so even if I paste it there, that is all for your documentation and record, because if you come across this one after 1 year, 2 year, you know from where to start and stuff. Okay, so again, looking at the original request, you can see that this is something which we have already tested. There is a post bank transfer. Okay, so I start from the first, and what does the step 3 says? So you try to identify the path, query, body, headers, cookie, and try to question yourself why this is there. Why this is there, what is its use, how can I break it, tone it, reverse it, repeat it. Okay, that is the main step. Okay, so I will start looking at the request right from the beginning. Okay, post, bank transfer, and everything. Okay, so why this is in the post? That is the curiosity. Okay, so one of the assumption which I can make is transfer only happens if the request is post. Okay, so what if I can uh, transfer money using get requests? So that is my misuse hypothesis. Okay, we have already covered this one: content length, cache control, accept, origin. I'm not sure whether the server would have some sort of validation on the server that we can only do the transfer fund if the request is originated from this website, not from the other website. Okay, so because this is there, so I'm going to make an assumption: server only allows, and this is the control that I'm assuming that it would have on the server side. It can or it cannot be, but this is something we are just logging it down to create the test cases. We are not yet trying to test the test cases. So server only allowed transferring funds if the request has the origin of that website only and only. Okay, what if the origin of the transfer fund request is coming from twitter.com or anything else? Okay, I will test it later on. And then content type, user agent. Okay, probably server might have some sort of validation that user agent only accepts this. Okay, so for example, I'll have the same thing, but let's say the user agent header. Okay, server only transfer fund request has originated request has originated from valid user agent header and not any garbage value. Okay, so what if the user agent header is not in the form of any browser but just any random text or garbage? Again, you looked at the user agent header, you're asking this question yourself: can you break it? Can you give a garbage? Can you reverse it? Can you not give it the user agent header? Okay, so another test case could be What if you entirely skip user agent header and still repeat the request? Okay, probably I'll add it as a new test case here or hypothesis. Now the same can go for the origin, but I'm not logging it for now, and then I'll make this as 2. Okay. Okay, now you look at this one, from account to account and transfer, and then transfer money. So I think those are the same stuff which we are seeing on UI part. So nothing much we can do here. But I think some of the stuff we can do it here is this. So we see this, okay, and the some of the assumptions which I'm making here is, okay, so assumption one, I can only use from account or to account one time only, within one time only per request. Okay, because you can see that it's one time. What if I use from account twice in single request and still process the request? Okay, or probably you can use the same account, but let's say if you're transferring 124, but if you're using the two account twice, does it double up the money in your account? Okay, you wouldn't know that without looking at the actual request. Okay, so assumption 2 would be, no matter how many times I use two account, money is only credited once per request. Okay, so the next test case would be, if I use multiple two account, double or triple money is credited. Okay, so this is how you will have to build your curiosity, by looking at every single part of the request and try to ask these questions to yourself. How can I break it? How can I repeat it? How can I join it? How can I give garbage? How can I reverse the intent of what they are trying to do? Okay, so this is what they are trying to do. And the negative value is something which we have already mentioned earlier. So we can talk about the negative value later on. Now, I'm trying to wrap this up now. Okay, so imagine for one single feature, you have 17 hypothesis cases. So now what you need to do, okay, so you need to fill the other part. Now, whether this is up to you, whether you want to fill or not is up to you. Okay. For documentation is good, but I know it would be a lengthy process, but I still have another mind map way, which I'll show you later on. Okay. So login is required. So let's say how to test. So re- use, let's say, use normal process, capture request, remove cookie, and repeat through repeater. Okay. So this is how you would test. Now, true positive would be, money gets credited or transferred without session cookie. False positive would be, user is redirected to login page. Okay, now again, one more thing. I'm only writing the hypothesis and up to G column only. Okay. I'm not going to write anything expected true and expected false positive, or probably I'll just change it to, true positive and false positive. Okay, so there are two ways. So for example, if you test this and whatever is the outcome, you just have one more column and just write the comment that, okay, user was redirected, hence this is false positive or true positive. Or you predefine the criteria that, okay, if it's true positive, I'm expecting this outcome. If it's false positive, I'm expecting this outcome. Okay, so this is how you would complete the entire workflow. I hope that helps you in order to define the business logic flow, because uh, you can you can just look at this one, the quality of business logic flows, test cases that we have generated just for one request. Okay, so these are the 17 total, business logic flows that we have created just by looking at one request. Okay, and yet on top of that, you would still run a scanner to find the SQL injection, cross-site sifting and stuff. Okay, now I, based on my creativity, could only create, 17. You, based on your creativity, you can create more. Okay. Now I'll also show you what is the last step to this process, which is using an AI. Okay. So for example, if I go to ChatGPT, okay, and I have created my, so if I go to ChatGPT and I have created my own custom GPT here, which is Logic Pentest. Okay, so what does it do? So basically, it is dedicated to uncovering the business logic flaws just by looking at the HTTP request and response. Okay, so what I will do, I'll go here again, I'll remove this. Okay, and then I will, and why the documentation is important, you will come to know. Okay, so I'll take this. I'm testing transfer funds functionality of the bank application. Normal user flow is below. Okay. Um, I think this request is still get, but the majority we are going to get the test cases from the post request because that's our main request. Below is our main transfer request. I'm not even asking you to create the test cases because that is something which is already embedded into the instructions. Okay, so now what does it does? It takes the input, it thinks of all the different business logic flaws. Okay, some of them would be definitely overlapping to what we have created. Okay, but there could be many things which are new. Now it is going to definitely generate the misuse hypothesis or the test cases. So we can write the test cases and we can have a assumption that what server would be expecting if we do this sort of testing. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so allow it a minute to complete. Okay, so after 2 minutes of thinking, now we have the results. Okay, so we have the prioritized table on what all can be done. So IDOR on the from account. So access control is a category. Try debiting a victim account not owned by a session. Obviously, I think one of the basic test case which I forgot is you see this from account and to account. Okay, these are both my account, but okay. So one of the assumption is A3. I can only debit and credit from my accounts only. Okay, so the misuse hypothesis would be what if I can use completely different account other than these two, which is 80,001 and 80,002 kind of stuff. So which is definitely not this number and this number, and I start using some random number, and can I do that or not? Okay, and then from to intervention param confusion. So evidence suggests server may flip from to exploit to pull it from the victim. Okay, so for example, let's say it is telling you that this is from to. Okay, so let's say currently your to account is also your checking account, but let's say if you are transferring fund from your account to someone else account, but what if you use their account number into your from account? Okay, so for example, if my A3 gets successful and if I get a true positive, my A4 would be use someone else account into from account parameter and try transferring funds. So that is my not server assumption, that is my hypothesis. Okay, so my hypothesis would be I cannot use someone else account into from account while transferring. Okay, so likewise, now you can imagine the power of AI. I think it will generate more, test cases for you. It will tell you what are the one line rational and key indicators if the successful test and negative and zero, which we already completed, double send the parallel post request like a race condition which we already added. Okay, um, this is the precision because I mentioned to you that you give 132 and it converts into 132.0. So what if you start giving something like this? Okay, so parser maybe get confused that what kind of amount is this. Okay, you skip the submit transfer button and then still try to give something else. So for example, if you look at the request, so this the message says transfer money. I think this is one of the test cases which I also forgot, which is you can give any custom name here. Okay, so for example, if I go to repeat and I give any custom stuff here, okay, and then I try to copy the same in the browser. Okay, so transfer money, transfer account. Okay, understood. So probably this is something which is not highlighted back. Okay, so that was something which was AI was trying to tell that, okay, can we give something else and can we still execute the UI step. So this was the last step. Again, let me repeat the entire process so that you can recall it. Okay, so you go to the step one, which is creating a normal flow, this one. Okay, you log it down to your Excel over here, so you know the normal process. Then based on that, you will create a D2, which is repeat, break, join, tone apart, reverse, and then you will create the hypothesis. So you will create a server assumption, what is a normal for server and what could be the reverse or repeat, break, whatever misuse hypothesis. Do not even worry about G, H, and I column, or whether you want to skip it, you can skip it. Okay, you complete that entire second step and you will generate the D2 output, which is this one. And then you will add a new column, D column, and then try logging the important HTTP request. Once you look at the important HTTP request, okay, you will try to identify everything from line by line, cookie, headers, parameters, and try to ask a question that what does the parameter name suggest, what is its value, what is trying to do, and how can I reverse, break, repeat that logic from the D2. And then you will have a updated D3 table which is derived from the D2. This time we are looking more into the parameter stuff. So you had a D2, you looked at the post request and look at the parameter cookies and stuff, headers and everything. You derived more test cases. So so you already had a test cases. You looked at the parameter, everything, headers, body, everything, and then you derived more test cases. Okay, the last step was to give everything to AI. Okay, and build your custom GPT or custom LLM where you can just give the information and it will derive the test cases. So I cannot reveal the instructions. It's not proper, right? But I'm working on this something. It's still hallucinating. But I think what I can tell you that I have created logic pentest in a way that my instructions are I'm giving you the raw request and a bit of a contest, and you have to generate a very hard code formatted, summary table for the test cases. Okay, and make sure that you focus more on the business logic rather than SQL injection and cross accepting. So these are the instructions you can build by your own self. Use AI, copy paste all of these test cases, or at least copy paste this one, which is your misuse hypothesis, paste them here. Now you can imagine, let's say if I paste, for example, uh, this over here, okay, and then I remove this, okay, and then I remove everything, and okay. Now, if I copy paste those here and based on this, I will create my server assumption that what server might be doing if I perform this one. So it's a reversible process. If you can think of a hypothesis first and then assume what server would be doing, then it's fine. But the ideal way is you imagine what server is expected to do and then you create a hypothesis. Okay. So by end of that AI process, which with step 4, which I haven't mentioned on my slide, you still have 31 quality business logic flawed test cases just for a simple bank transfer, stuff. And when I say simple, which means we are still using a test website, which has a very simple workflow for the money transfer. Still, you got 31 test cases. Now imagine if you're going, if you're doing that for HSBC, Barclays, ICICI, or any bank in India, they would have a multiple step, multiple post request, multiple get request steps in order to transfer one. There would be OTP generated and stuff. So this is why this is super important for you to go into right into the detail and have everything documented, because tomorrow if you are testing some another bank's website, probably majority of the test cases would be same. The test cases which would be different is based on what you see on the request and response parameters and values, right? So this is the method one. Now I'm going to deep dive into the method two. Now the steps are same. Understand the flow, create a hypothesis, look at the HTTP, map GUI and HTTP, again update the hypothesis, and last step is AI. But I'm going to do that in the form of the mind map. Okay, so the way I would use the mind map, okay, let me save this file so that if anyone wants, I can send them later on. So let's say Alto. Okay, so I'm using free mind because I love it. Free open source. Okay, so let's say I'm telling a site, uh, and let me give a site name which is this one. Okay, bear with me if you can't see that. I'm gonna zoom it later on. Okay, and then uh, I would like to mention how to map everything into a one flow. Okay, so there are three parts. So one is header, footer, and another is body. Most of the stuff in the body would be too much. That's why I'm keeping a body on the left hand side, or you can do vice versa. So the header is everything which is this one, body is everything which is this, and footer is everything which is this. Okay, so header we have, so let's say if I sign off, then what all do we have on header? So sign in, contact us, feedback. So I'm gonna have, let's say, sign in, then let's say contact us, feedback. Okay, sign in, contact us, feedback, and then there is a search bar with go button. Okay, what do we have in footer? So footer we have privacy policy, security statement. And I'm not going to add a lot of stuff, but this is how you would map it. Okay, and then we have a body part which has most of these stuff. Now, just by looking at the website, you can imagine that if I click anything here, it would be probably the same thing which is here. Okay, so let's say if I copy paste entire stuff, I'm not sure how it's gonna look like, but let me paste it here. Okay, so it definitely doesn't look. So personal, small business, inside, altero mutual. So let's say personal, this one, and small business. Okay, so this is how you would do a complete mind map. Okay, so now for one request, how would you do the same repetition of the business logic flow? So that is something I'm going to let you know. So let's say if you go to admin, let's say you map the entire workflow and everything. Now you are on the transfer fund. So what would you do on transfer fund? So let's say here you have something transfer funds. Okay, so for this one, the URL is this. So I'm going to log it something like this. Uh, Sorry, I'm using Mac, and I think the fonts or something are not working, but it will look good here. Um, okay, so transfer fund is that, and then we have from to and everything. So now what I'm going to do, transfer fund, and then I'm going to have, let's say, misuse hypothesis. Okay, so now we have transfer fund. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna, let's say, send some money from corporate to checking. Okay, and the money has been sent. Okay, so here I'll write something workflow. Okay, and the workflow suggests that uh, go to transfer funds, select two distinct accounts, add money, click on transfer. Basically what all you wrote here is the same thing you would write there. Okay, so yes, you need to log in and stuff, but because I didn't cover login, because you would already have a login here, so login would be tested there. Okay, so these are your workflow. Okay, for each workflow you would create a hypothesis. So within the workflow part I will create one more, which is um, sorry, within the workflow part the last one would be misuse hypothesis. Okay, I will mark it as bold, and then based on the workflow, I'll try to create a hypothesis. So let's say I'm creating a couple of hypotheses. Here I'm not logging the server assumption because I need to do a bit of a fast process. Okay, so let's say I pick this one. I know the what is the normal stuff because I can predict that. I can see that in the UI, and now I'm doing the entire pen test. Okay, so I need to do a little bit of fast mapping, otherwise I won't be having a time to test. So the first method which I showed you is for more for the bug bounty hunters who has a sufficient time to go deep dive into one part, and the second method is more for the pen testers who are working in a consulting company, so they can do an entire mind mapping, can generate a hypothesis, and then start doing a test cases. Okay, so let's say this one is the first one, this one is the second one. Okay, again, you don't have to create Excel and create a mind map after that. This is something I'm trying to save my time. Okay, so you come to personal, you look at the transfer fund URL, you know the normal workflow. Based on that, you create a hypothesis. Okay, now one more thing, after this one, you would also go ahead and generate a request. So when the request gets generated, it would look something like this. So I want you to ma mark it as main request here. Okay, and that main request would be something like this. Okay, so the main request would be something like this. Okay, in order to save your time, what I would suggest, mostly try to keep the uh, requests and its parameters up to what you are going to test mostly. Okay, so I think the most important elements in the request are this one, which is the body part, the parameters and stuff. Okay, yes, headers and everything you would also test, but that can be also tested by the scanners and stuff. Okay, so now by looking at the URL, post, method, cookies and stuff, you will generate more test cases, and those more test cases would be nothing but the same thing that we have created manually here, right? These are some of the test cases. So that is something which would go here. Okay, so this is how you can map every single stuff. So for example, let's do one thing for signing. So let's say signing is there. Let me now, I'm not going to use Excel because otherwise you would be getting confused. So let me close both of this. Okay, let me go here. Okay, so sign in, if I click here, this is the request. So what I would do, sign in tab, this is the request. Okay, workflow is you go to the request, go to the URL, give ID and password, nothing else. Give ID, password, click on submit. Okay, so these are the normal stuff. Now, based on that, my misuse, I now because it's a login request, you can't do much more, but still, I would try to create a misuse hypothesis. Okay, um, can I give any garbage? Because this is the only thing which we can do, right? You try to give a garbage value here, okay, and nothing else. Okay, now it is asking for the username, but can I give an email ID? Okay, so that would be another one. Can I give email ID? Okay, and again, these are something which we are doing without looking at the HTTP request. And then there is a password, and then there is a login button. Okay, login failed. We are sorry, but the username password was not found in the system. Okay, so can I give any other input which changes the server error message? Okay, I'm not sure. I'm just guessing wild. If I try to give some other stuff, can it change the server message? Okay, now let's do one thing. We'll capture the request and then post it here. So workflow, and then I would suggest main request. Okay, mark it as bold. You go to the Bob suite, you look at the proxy, login. So this is the main request. Okay, now again, if you want to copy paste everything, up to you, but I think if you test headers for one or two requests, you are done for the entire application, until and unless there are new addition to the headers and stuff. Okay, but if not, then only copy the stuff that are most important. So for login requests, for any sort of request, if there are parameters and cookies, they are most important. So I would test something like this. So let's say this, and I'm going to also take the part. Sorry. Okay, so now looking at the request, what can I do? Okay, can I submit request using get? Okay, so just a second, I think the format is not correct. Okay, so this one is there. I think from here I need to remove this. Okay, so the format is correct. Okay, so can I do it using get? Okay, again for the cookies, can I decode cookies? Okay, obviously J session ID won't be helpful because we know it's a session ID. Okay, so but still my hypothesis would be, does J is J session ID is even helpful, because we haven't been logged in, right? So without login, there is no point of having that session ID. Okay, so can I decode the Altoro accounts cookie? Okay, so that is my okay, hypothesis. And what is there in the post part? So UID, so UID password button submit. Okay, so UID password. Okay, so UID stands for user ID, password, as you know, and then there is a submit button. Okay, can I give valid two UIDs but one password? Can I give valid two passwords but one UID? Okay, so I think these are the test cases which we can perform on the login request. And let's say I will now give this to ChatGPT, and where is the logic Pentest, and then I'll say I am testing now login request. Here is the workflow and actual request content. Okay, so now I mean ChatGPT is smart, so we don't need to copy paste. We're gonna copy this entire stuff. And again, I don't want to confuse GPT by looking at a lot of headers and parameters and stuff. So just to save time, I'm gonna change it to the instant mode here, so that we can get the table ASAP, and then we can start adding the test cases or the misuse hypothesis. Cool. So it has now created a table. So session fixation via cookie. So basically there is a session ID cookie. What if we create a custom cookie, and after the login that cookie remains same? So if that happens, then we can set the session cookie for our victims, and then trick them using that session cookie so that we can log in into that account directly. Okay, so session fixation cookie tempering. So I mean encoded cookie, I think that is something we have done. Weak CSRF token, yes, because there is no CSRF token. But again, probably it would be hard to exploit because you can't, trick victim to log in into the account remotely. Parameter manipulation is there, so missing input validation may allow SQLI and stuff. So obviously that is something a scanner will definitely test. So I don't need to test it. Okay, replay login request. So what if we use the same credential, reuse and check the account lockout exists or not? So yeah, I think one of the stuff is account lockout on wrong on let's say n wrong password attempts. So that is there. So I think these are the only tests. I think I couldn't think of more. ChatGPT gave me one more extra. So this is how you would create a complete mind map for each and every request, each and every feature, and this is how you would test it. Okay, now let's go back to the presentation. I won't take much of your time because it's been too long anyway. Okay, so when to use this methodology and when not to use. Okay, so the three step and the fourth last step, the GPT one, which I explained, Use it when you seek a unique high impact findings with low duplicate risk. Okay, you can only do that when you have a very much flexible time and you can deep dive into one feature for even days or weeks or anything. Okay, because that feature is complex, and in order to complete one feature there are, let's say, 7 steps and 14 requests or something, and there are dependencies on the other requests and other parameters and stuff. Okay, because you got a lots and lots of time. Okay, you can map the end-to-end workflow in a mind map or in Excel, and I would prefer Excel because Excel has more details. For example, multi-role user, for example, multi-role setup, tenant payment, subscription, quotas, and everything. Okay, don't use it if you're working in a consulting firm as a pen tester or a security analyst and you have a time bound pen testing. Because if you're trying to follow this methodology, maybe yes, you may get one or two high or critical, but then you only tested one or two high critical in the last 2 or 3 weeks only. But your clients would be expecting a 360-degree results with scanner and stuff, and you have tested all the functionalities and everything, and which is hard, because if they don't provide a sufficient time, you're not going to test websites with the quality. But I think that's where the gamification starts. Some companies are better at finding high end criticals in no time, whether the companies are relying on the OAS checklist and scanner results and stuff. Okay, so if you have a time bound limitation, if you're working in a consulting firm and you're delivering a project on a multiple clients, multiple timelines, multiple projects, going on, then this methodology probably won't be helpful. I think the mind map one, you can still use it, but depends how you will set up your workflow. So in the last company when I was working for KPMG, the way we were doing it is, my juniors were creating the mind map. They submit the mind map where I check the hypotheses and test cases, and I can think of anything else from my end or by looking at the request, I just add them. Once we sign off the mind map, so so in last couple of companies where I worked, as a pen testers and a teamers, what we used to do, so I was managing the pen testing delivery. So when a new project comes, if the so when the new project comes, if the duration is, let's say, 2 weeks, then I give 2 days for my juniors to create the mind map. So I give 2 days for my colleagues to create the mind map. So once they create a mind map, everything from the request point of view, hypothesis, test cases point of view, then they submit the mind map to me. Okay, by looking at the request or by looking at the feature or workflow, if I can think of more test cases and more hypotheses, I will add that into the mind map. Once I sign off the mind map, then only they will go ahead and do the test cases testing. Otherwise, they won't go. So this is how we were managing it. So don't do it if you are in consulting and you don't have established ways of working and stuff. Okay, if you want the breadth first, let's say you want to test the entire application from 360-degree point of view, then I think this methodology is not helpful, because this is only deep diving into the business logic flow with extremely detailed stuff. But it's not helpful if you are finding all the SQL, XSS, scanner stuff, low-hanging fruit, headers and everything, whether it's a manually or automated way. Okay, and let's say if companies are giving you the project for the pen testing, but I think they're only worried about the compliance. Because of the compliance they have to give one or two projects to the pen testing companies in a year, then this methodology is not helpful. Now I know that from consulting point of view it is helpful to you if you find some good stuff, but I think compliance teaching is something your clients would always have, time bound. They cannot spend a lot of budget, they cannot spend a lot of time, they cannot spend a lot of budget to give you more extra days to test the applications thoroughly. And for that they have some backup consulting firms or backup projects which are already going on. So I think that's all from my end. I hope that methodology is helpful, it's unique for you. Contact me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer this. You can visit my website and you can find all my social media links and everything over there. Thank you so much.